This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 21, 2024 meeting of the North Haven Board of Finance. Welcome everyone back from the summer break. Start of another productive season for the Board of Finance. Mr. Frieda will not be able to make it this evening. He has another engagement with a state task force, I believe, that he had to go to instead. So with that, we'll start where we usually do with the minutes of the prior two meetings. Why don't we start with the May 15th meeting, and Tammy, Lori Jean just pointed out that if we wouldn't mind, the meeting was on the 15th, but
Yep.
you got it, okay.
No, it was on the 22nd, and you have it as the 15th.
What was that? Sorry, Nancy?
I'm sorry. In terms of changes to the agenda, the first one is to change the minutes of the special meeting that's listed on our agenda. It says May 15th. It actually needs to be changed to May 22nd.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I had it backwards.
That's okay.
The minutes are right, the agenda is incorrect, I
Correct,
guess.
exactly. And while we're at it, in terms of potential changes to the agenda, if I could also add an item for discussion under new business and another item for discussion under old business, I'd like to make a motion to make those changes.
Well, why don't you tell us what they are?
Oh, sure. I'd just like a very brief discussion under new business of the Quinnipiac voluntary payment as it pertains to the end-of-year closeout statements for fiscal year 23-24. And then for new business, I'd just like to bring up the the auditor report, meaning the meeting with the auditor, and the CAFR report for now both 23-24 and 24-25.
Well, I would say this, it was my intention to discuss the CAFR anyways, which we can certainly still add if you'd like, under
Sure.
either new or old business.
Exactly.
And I guess as far as the, I think as far as Quinnipiac goes, Nancy, we're going to talk about the year end.
Yes.
And I think that would generally fall into the top of the year end, because I'm going to have Ingrid talk about that a little bit.
Sure. No,
But
I can certainly work it into that discussion. That's fine.
Okay. Back to the minutes. May 22nd, any changes to those minutes? Seems quiet, I'll call for a motion.
Make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Forgot to say aye. Why don't we move on to the minutes of June 12th? Any comments on the minutes? I'll take a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so I was going to say, Nancy, normally we sort of launch right into the, the monthly reports, the report of the budget, et cetera, and for the 2 months, but given that it's the August meeting and June, it does reflect the full year, and because we have 1 or 2 summaries in the package, I had asked Ingrid to please give the board a little bit of overview of the year and of the June reports, and then we can talk about them. So I would ask her to please go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to start with the CAFR. We're expected to receive a draft by the end of next week. We have been working hard on that. We had delays due to the transition to our new auditors, and other towns were prioritized due to their audits being behind a couple of years. We have also started to work with CLA. This is our new auditors, to make sure this year's audit is on time.
All right, if I could, I talked to Mr. Frieda, I talked to Mr. Monaco. Mr. Frieda tells me that the Office of Policy Management is well aware that
Yes.
we're behind on our CAFR. There are apparently other towns in the state that are also behind, and some as many as 2 years. I think the other issue that is causing the delay, and Ingrid would be better suited to confirm this, but what I'm told is that our current auditor is being especially careful, I'm sure because he knows there's a transition going on. He wants to make sure that the quality of his work is what might be expected from our new accounts.
Yes.
So, Nancy, did you have something on that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, again, it's just, we had left off, I think, last discussing this in April with an assurance that we would meet with the auditor, I believe, in May. And then, of course, we got into the throes of not only one, but two referendums. And so we ended in June with no CAFR and no meeting with the auditor. And then, of course, we had a break. So now, unfortunately, we're facing the pileup of 2 years. And if we don't meet with the auditor soon, then we will be faced with being off schedule for the next cycle, which typically, barring the last 3 or 4 years, typically we meet with the auditor sometime in December or January. So I'm just a little bit concerned that as this drags on with 1 year, unfortunately, it snowballs. That's all.
I would hope it's not. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in this room or within Town Hall that's not disappointed by the speed with which the CAFR is being completed. And so I think the new firm will have better resources than our existing firm and could hopefully move faster. I think there's probably also a lot of cleanup that's gone on through the efforts of both Ingrid and Rich over the last year or two, which should speed things along. So I'm hoping that the delay in this CAFR doesn't affect the preparation of the next one. I guess I can't promise you that, but I would hope that we do have our meeting, which actually I thought used to be actually not in December, January, because the CAFRs aren't even due in Connecticut till 12/31, but it did occur way earlier, certainly. It occurred in the spring.
Certainly before the budget workshops start, I think
Yeah.
is the main concern, because once we get into that, it really does get very busy. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, I wanted to continue with our revenue budget. If we can, June revenue budget. It was not necessary to receive fund balance in the revenue budget as we're trying to keep our AAA rating. And at the agencies, they see that as being a deficiency to receive fund balance. Our tax
Ingrid?
department,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I think, let me do this if you don't mind. And then I'd rather give them a little big picture, so maybe I could do that. So big picture, the town had a good revenue year and a very good expense year. So Ingrid has provided some summary reports here where, although revenue shows in the summary report that she's got as being short $261,000, she started to say that we did not use our appropriated or unappropriated fund balance, which is $1,450,000. And then secondarily, we had a very good expense year. We were underexpended by $475,000. She's going to go into that a little bit more in a minute, I'm sure. And so preliminarily unaudited, we had a surplus of about $214,000. So I'm sorry, Ingrid, to interrupt. I just want to give sort of the big picture before we get into the
Sure.
specifics. So please go on about the revenue.
sure. Our tax department collected about an extra $550,000 back in back taxes. The state made a mid-year adjustment to our ECS grant, and this is why we see an uncollected balance of $22,000. Interest in short-term investment was about $769,000 above budget for a total of $1.2 million. This was not anticipated due to fluctuation in rates. We negotiated with all the banks that we deal with to be able to achieve this. We collected an extra $195,000 on building fees, an extra $185,000 in fire fees. Our Quinnipiac contribution was received, but it was received with restrictions. So this is going to go, this went in the paper, and this is going to go to a different fund. For fiscal year 2025, Quinnipiac said that there will be no restrictions. So this will go in our budget. For the end of fiscal year 2024, we had a shortfall in revenue of $261,146.96. Any questions on the revenue side?
Yes, I I have a question. Ingrid, the way that the report is written, it makes it seem like we had no month-to-date revenue for the last month of the year. They're all zeros.
This is because this is our final budget for the year.
Right, so that should just be reflected in year-to-date revenue, but it would, why don't we have an indication of month-to-date revenue for the last month of the year?
Because this was if I do see this is a 13, period 13. It means that is our last final budget.
It means it's a post-June 30th report, as opposed to a report for the month of June.
Okay.
I think Nancy would probably want to request, and we should receive a June report that might have that column filled in. 'Cause,
Yes.
I mean, you have those figures within the system.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yes, we can
Yes.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the same for the expenditures.
Sure.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Ingrid, the town clerk fees were short by almost 200,000.
They have been historically short by about that much. Yes, we are over budgeting on that.
Could we also get a breakdown of the town miscellaneous receipts, which is under town revenue general? I say that because, based upon my records, we received an additional almost $190,000 since the end of April. So I think that would be helpful to see
Sure.
where those are where that's coming from.
It's usually blight fees, bounce payment fees from the tax office,
Yeah.
alarm.
The whole
Police
the whole
department, but I can
category
get
is
it, yes.
57% over what we projected, so I think it would be
Sure.
good to know for future budget forecasting, sort of where we've made a lot.
Sure. I can provide that next meeting.
Any other comments on revenue or questions on revenue before we have Ingrid talk about the expenditure side?
I just want to know, on debt service reserve, how did we misestimate that? Was there some,
I don't think it's a misestimation, Mike. I just don't think we need to move the money over.
Right.
okay, so that,
We didn't receive it in.
No. The debt service reserve is the,
It's
Is
a-
the
There
ex
is,
fund.
we received 250,000, yes.
right.
see,
hold on, let's stop. The debt service reserve was created, right? And it includes the premiums that we've been getting on our bonds, right? That's where the source of it is, right? So it's money that's in the town that we moved over, just like we might do the.
Special funds,
Or,
police.
yes, right, yeah.
yeah. Okay,
So I think what happened here is they simply didn't need to move the full 450 over, they only moved over 250.
okay. I didn't know if that was the case or whether actually we had less there than we predicted we would have.
Could be.
In that account.
Yes, we had less money than we predicted we will have.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. So did we have just 250 or did we only move 250?
I'll have to look into that, but I think we just moved 250. We
Okay,
have
so-
it in this budget year, we have more money, so.
Okay, I think Mike's question is, was there more money in the debt service reserve and we only moved 250? Or was there only 250 and that's we moved over? That's- I think
And you don't
so.
have to answer the question right now.
Yeah.
Just,
So
yeah.
what is the balance of the debt service account versus how much did we transfer into it based upon revenue?
Yes, I understand.
Two different questions. Thank you. It's nice to see the building fees and, of course, the correlated fire fees and paramedic service fees up. Well, I shouldn't say paramedic fees, but the fire fees, of course, parallel the building fees. So it's nice to see both of those are up, and also the paramedic services is very close to goal, which is great to see.
We'll go to the expense side now. I'm going to highlight a couple of departments that were substantially over. We can start with page 1, election. It was over by $15,000 over budget. This was due to the failed budget referendum expenses. If we go to page 4, building inspection, it was over by $54,000. This is due to consultants, and this is also due that we collected an extra $195,000 in building fees. If we go to page 5, and then it ends in page 6, our annual audit, this is due to the transition to new auditors and consulting services. We are understaffed in the finance department by 2 people. We had a key personnel out for 3 months, and we are getting a lot of audits by the state for grants that were not audited since 2017. So we have a lot of backlog. If we go to page 6, personnel policy, it was over by $171,000. This was due to the retirement of long-term personnel. Page 10 and 11, the fire department, it was over by $115,000. This was mainly due to contractual replacement staffing, $117,000, and vehicle maintenance and repairs. This was due to the rental of a fire engine. We were waiting for replacements. I believe we just got those replacements currently.
Isn't the rental out of capital?
No,
No?
no.
Or the regular lease, but I think that's.
The
this
lease,
is-
the
Oh,
lease
this
for
is
the
the- in
engine.
addition-
This
in
was an
addition to-
addition because we were
The
waiting
short-term
for.
rental,
Yes.
understood. Yep.
The chief mentioned that, I believe that.
Yep.
Rec center, in page 15 and 16, I'll let you guys get to there. It was over budget by $17,000, mainly to maintenance. There were repairs in the hot water tank for the showers, there was fountain that had to be replaced, and there was a big leak on the basement in the mechanical room. So this is the reason why that department was over. Utilities, page 17. It was over by $98,000. This is due to an increase in the wire fire protection. These are the hydrants. It was over by $65,000. And the traffic lights, as we know, any repair for a traffic light is usually $30,000 and more.
Ingrid, just on the water for the fire protection, I mean, I don't recall that line fluctuating to this degree. Did we think we got, was it more volume, do you think, or did the price of water go up?
The price of water, and I think the volume as well.
Yeah.
Yes. I think every year we can't, we don't know how much it's going to be, so we can't really have an exact figure for it.
Ingrid, will we be hit with the public service?
Yes, I just
Or
started
increase?
noticing that for the UI,
You know,
big bills. We're getting big bills, 10,000 and more on fees. Yes, that's affecting everybody. I just saw that today. And insurance in general. This was due to a net loss on that fund of $902,000 and $2 million in additional claims from previous year due to serious illness claims. We decided that, the fund can be a deficit. We made an additional contribution to the fund of $981,000. I provided today in your desks a little summary of the medical fund. In the top, in this sheet, you can see if we didn't do the additional contribution, that fund would have been at a deficit of $873,000. And with the new contribution that we made, it's gonna be on a surplus of $108,000 for fiscal year 2024. This is a very low surplus.
So I think the members all probably recall, because we had a lot of conversation about insurance, probably more so for the Board of Ed in the spring than the town, but it was certainly mentioned more than once that the town had no reserves when we started the year. We had 29,000, which is really nothing for the size of the plan.
Yes, the previous year before we had a
We had a deficit, right. Ingrid did an analysis of the plan, as you can see, and we ran out of the loss. Fortunately, given the year we had the ability to move over the $981,000 to cure the loss and provide at least a positive starting point for the following year, this current year that we're in now.
Yes, so for fiscal year 2024, we had a savings on our expense side of $474,893.57. Any questions on the expense side?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was the overall savings you just gave us for the year?
For our
437?
expenses.
Yeah. Let's pause there and let's just see if the members have any questions, if you don't mind, Ingrid.
Sure.
I think we covered most of it. It was overtime, wage differentials, supplies. I mean, I think we covered, I had pretty much everything written on this that you talked about. So appreciate that.
On the last page, again, the capital account,
Yes,
it just lists what is budgeted, and then the year-to-date expended with a sum.
yes,
And the
it's
total.
it's a transfer out to capital.
Uh-huh.
This was done usually through, this was done after when the audit was being done, when the CAFR, and the auditor explained this last year. He would transfer everything that was left in that to a capital non-recurrent account. And we are reconciling that account. I will give you guys reports in our next couple of meetings on how much is left, but most of them were expended.
I see, because in previous months.
Right, you would see
could
the expenditures,
the
right, but I
expenditure
transfer it so it could be
by line item.
clean in the other fund.
Right, well, hopefully we'll see both.
Yes,
So if
you
any
will
of
see
these
the
expenditures
expenditures.
took place in
Yeah.
June, then we'll see it in the report that Mr. Hallahan has requested.
Right, well, before, yeah,
And then in addition to that, we'll see a capital.
You won't
breakdown.
see that in period 12, because I transferred the whole thing, I did it clean.
I see.
Yes,
So even with this additional report, the capital will still be blank
yes.
for the entire year. I see.
but you'll give us a supplemental report as to
Supplemental
what.
report, that's just-
Okay, yeah. Before, we made the request for the amended revenue, and obviously we're making the request for the amended expenditure report with the month-to-date expenses listed.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I heard you were the best, and you're proving it tonight, so thank you.
And in terms of going through all of the, the different departments and just kind of circling those that are, ended the year over 100%, it seems as though, I counted about 14?
14.
Was that your number?
Yes.
Okay, great.
It was 14 departments.
And then, just out of curiosity, under streets and roads, I think there was this assumption, once we pivoted to a different handling of MRSA, that particular department should be expected to be over budget, because those line items that are over budget would be basically offset by the MRSA funding that we receive from the state. And yet, I think for the last 2 years, it has been under budget.
It was under budget, but if you see, it was mainly affecting the wage differential.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see that both personnel full-time
and
and
the
overtime are both as line items over budget.
Yes.
But again, we received $2.2 million from the state of Connecticut, and the total budget for streets and roads is only $47,000. So I would really expect that,
The total budget for streets and roads is 2.8 million. They were under $47,000.
oh, I'm sorry, it was under by 47, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
misspoke. But they were at like 98%, so I guess I'm just wondering,
When we were using MRSA, we carried balances from previous years. So MRSA had funds available, so we were using those funds in the budget.
Yes.
Now
Well, we
everything is in
changed
the
the
budget.
presentation, right?
Right,
Because
because
nobody
nothing
liked-
is being charged.
nobody
There's no
It's at
negative
zero
numbers.
right
Nobody
now.
liked the old
There's
presentation,
no
right?
negative numbers, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
But I guess I'm just curious that for 2 years now, I guess we've had some pretty
Mild winters.
winters.
Yes.
Which kind of raises the issue of also, under streets and roads, the winter maintenance supplies was at about 90% of what we budgeted.
Well, but
Yes,
we covered this, I think, at
Yeah.
one of our late meetings, that the suggestion one meeting was, well, can we get out of some of these contracts? And the answer was no, is my recollection.
We couldn't because it was already, the new requirement was that they must order about 50% of what they had pre-ordered. And I spoke with Michael Maturo, and he said that for this year, he was able to adjust that, so he wouldn't pre-order as much.
For
And
next
then he
year.
was able to
Right.
do some savings there.
Right.
But we couldn't do anything for previous
Yeah,
year.
that came up in the budget discussion.
Right, oh, no, I remembered it, but I thought we were going to look into exactly what you're describing.
Yes, we were
And
not
certainly,
able
this
to.
is more than 50% of what we were anticipating, so.
Yes, we were not.
So that's why I was a little bit disappointed at 90%. Okay. And, I think that's it.
All right, why don't we look at the Board of Ed, sorry, Mike, was there a question? No question?
Well, so we're discussing the full year and
Oh, yes.
everything in the expenditure and revenue side. And if Mr. Frieda was here, I want to thank him once again for the meeting we had with with our medical insurance representatives. It was very enlightening. Being self-insured is a challenge in a way, but it's also something that we don't have too much direct control over. And the ways we can affect that line, well, the ways that line gets affected is through claims, obviously, and through the funding, how much we put aside in the budget, and then the third way is the end of the year adjustment. And there's no doubt that we can't run that account negative going into the new fiscal year. So that $981,000 had to go there. And so once we met with our representatives, and by the way, Blue Point's new representative is much better than anyone that was previously sent to us by them. That I did not object to the 26% increase on that line item once that meeting occurred. And it was a harsh reality, but again, the claims are what the claims are with the stop loss that we have. So that's a big under budgeted item, and I don't know, Tim. I mean, I can't say that we feel responsible for such a large deficit on that line item, but at least we may have addressed it in the upcoming fiscal year.
I did not forget the board's request that we get a report somewhat similar to what we get for the Board of Ed, which I think is in the package, actually. Ingrid can fill in, but I'm told that we're still down somewhere between 1 and 2 full FTEs in the department. So
Right.
Mr. Monaco did tell me just today, in fact, that
We're going to get some reporting in the future.
Yes, we're working on it.
Good.
Yes.
That's great. It's good to know. We do know you're, we do know
I didn't
you're.
want to overpromise.
Right. We understand the labor shortage in your office.
Yes, we just, somebody just resigned last week.
You resigned, yes, yeah. I'm sorry, but, okay, well, I hope you manage it as best possible, and the more you automate, the less man-hours you may need. And, sorry, so the other item I just wanted to address.
Do you mind if I just had one follow-up question on that,
sure.
Mike? So Ingrid, on the medical claims, do Do we have sort of the same 60-day window that we have with some, so that if a claim comes in, let's say, July 5th, that it gets applied to the old year if it occurred during the old year? How does that work?
So at the end of the year, by September, usually they have this report that's called the IBNR report, and that's how we balance the year. That's how they will let us know if it got applied to June or July, and that's how we balance.
I guess I meant this way. So the numbers we're looking at here, that's in these reports, right?
Yes,
So does this include claims that came in after the 30th that would have applied to the prior fiscal year? That's sort of my question.
no, it would be we get the claims weekly, and the last week, we will have to do that journal entry for previous year, yes. By June 30. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Okay,
So the numbers that are in here, and
Yes.
the big adjustment, right?
yep,
Are these only for claims that we paid through June 30th?
Yes.
Or do they include claims within sort of the 60-day window after the 30th?
no, June 30th,
Okay. And would you expect that number to change?
no.
Okay.
No, so any
Very
additional
small
claims
changes.
made for previous periods will be paid in, say,
In
the
a
July
current-
or August period.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so it's not when the claim actually occurs, it's just when it's
When we make
When
the
we
payment.
pay,
doing
Okay,
yes.
all right, thank you. Michael?
It was a very good question, Tim. You're pretty good at this.
You don't get the big chair without having those kind of questions, Mike.
Okay. The other thing, I'm wearing my Quinnipiac tie tonight because Quinnipiac did perform as they once upon a time promised and then almost reneged on.
My recollection was Mike repeated several times, we were not getting the money.
Right,
Many
we thought
times.
we were
Right.
not going to
Yes.
get it.
Right.
Yeah, I like it when he can turn a no into a yes with a little help from our friends. Yeah. But the question is Quinnipiac like State Farm? Are they, like a good neighbor, are they always going to be there? And the saying is, like good neighbor, State Farm is there, not maybe there, not could be there, not should be there, but are they there? So the question, I'd like the first selectman to just, in a nice, easy sort of way, find out if their commitment is automatic for the years to come. Is it a commitment they're making to this town where they reside for future years? Or is it year by year, depending on how they feel about certain policies and occurrences that occur within the town? Or planning and zoning or whatever.
So I think Mike obviously would have to address that. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Ingrid did say that they've committed to paying,
They did commit it this year,
For this
paying the
year, right,
300,000 unrestricted.
but you're right, Mike, it's, they've,
But they're like a business too, because I know people that work there and there were layoffs there, so. I mean, they're like they're a business, so if, it
Right.
could have been what happened and why they initially were saying no.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I thought that they made a business-like commitment to us.
didn't they commit to, maybe it was last year, I hope I got my years right. Didn't they commit to doing the training tower behind Northeast? Isn't that where their money went last year?
I have to look into
No?
that.
It may have, they also
Yeah.
put it toward a playground at
Yeah,
one
there was a
point.
playground, yeah, sorry. there was-
So I think the
That's what
tower
Mike's-
might have been 2 years ago.
Okay, that's what Mike said. They
Yeah.
donated money towards the playground,
Yeah,
which aren't cheap, they can be $100,000 at least.
right.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm in agreement with, I'm not sure if this is what you said, Tim, that in future years, even though it's on our next budget, in future years, the Quinnipiac contribution probably should not be a revenue item. Because if they get to decide what project it goes toward, and that project is not in our budget, that's not money that we can use for the expenditures that we budgeted.
I agree.
Exactly, and I couldn't agree more. You can't have it both ways. You cannot have it be a regular revenue line item,
Right.
and then when the money comes in, say, oh, no, sorry, I'm not going to use this to support the budget. Instead, I'm going to use it to support a project, however valuable that project may be, but a project that is not delineated as an expenditure in our budget. We list this as a regular revenue line item whose sole purpose is to support our budget. It is not intended to be an appropriated set of funds as dictated by anyone. It is unappropriated funds that are supposed to be put into our general fund in order to support our budget. And so I think I guess my first question is, have we received the $300,000?
This year for
Yes.
fiscal year, no.
I shouldn't say
Usually by
this
the
year.
end
No,
of
no,
the
no,
year.
not this year. For fiscal year 23, 24.
We did, but they were
received.
restricted. They
Okay,
put
but we
restrictions on
received the money.
We did.
It's in our general fund.
It's not in our general fund. Our
No.
general fund
No, it's
is
in-
our
No, that's why
operating
it's,
budget.
that's why it's zero.
It's
on-
in a
on
different
revenue.
fund.
Okay, so that's my first question.
Yes.
Is why wouldn't it?
Because they
Because
were
it's
Because it
restricted.
didn't go for anything in the budget.
Okay, so what is our accounting report that shows that we have received this money?
This is the general fund we're looking at.
Right, this is
okay?
our
There's all
operating
kinds of
budget.
funds
It
we
has
have that
nothing-
No,
don't
no, I
make it to the
understand.
board.
So my
So
specific
you will see
question
it in our CAFR, you will see it in that fund
Right.
when it gets received.
and then
Everything that gets received in the town of all funds, you will see it in the CAFR.
what fund did it go into in particular?
It's a special fund that we
It's
have
its
to
own
set up.
special fund.
Right.
It's its own special fund.
It has
Quinnipiac.
restrictions, so we can't commingle that money with anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, because in the past, not every year, but in the past, it has been treated like a regular revenue line item.
It
But
has,
that's
but
because they
this
didn't put
year,
restrictions on it.
they
Again.
restricted, so we
So
can't
when we
treat it the same
created the
way.
budget, we didn't create it with the idea that
let me-
whoever is providing the money has the ability
Right.
to impose restrictions.
But you're hitting a
They are
moot point
providing
right
the
now,
money, so they can put
because
restrictions.
Ingrid just said we're gonna get the money for the 25 budget. So when we go to prepare the budget going forward, that's a discussion we should have. I don't think we
Right.
have to keep rehashing this right now, because it's already been answered.
Here's my thought. I don't disagree, actually, with being conservative on the revenue side, which I think I've said in front of this camera many times, okay? And if the sentiment of the board come spring is that we shouldn't rely on the Quinnipiac money, then we should take it out of the budget. The fact that we didn't get it is disappointing, although Mike signaled all along we were not going to get it. We got it, but they restricted it, right? There's lots of other line items on here that can be short for different reasons. This is just another reason we didn't get the money, right? And another reason that we might want to be careful how we budget our revenues, right? Just like when we talk about what short-term interest rates are going to be or what our building fees are going to be, right? So we just have to be careful in the spring, and if the board wants to be careful and not include that revenue in the spring, well then, I guess I can say that might be the right thing to do.
So I'm sorry, I don't understand. By the spring, do you mean when we prepare the next fiscal year budget?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
this budget's
so,
over.
so let's back up. Last fiscal year, this was in the budget as a revenue line item. In the current fiscal year, it is considered a revenue line item. So whenever this second payment comes in, we'll be dealing with it for 2 different years. So independent of the next fiscal year budget for 25-26, we're still talking about 23-24, which we're just closing out, that's what we're discussing today, as well as the current fiscal year budget, which is 24-25. We have a revenue line item, which is $300,000 from Quinnipiac University for each year, both last fiscal year and the current fiscal year. And it is not being treated as a regular revenue line item, not by any decision that we've made
Wait a
on this
minute,
Board of
Nancy.
Finance.
What are you talking about?
What do you mean?
If any grantor, whether it's a town of North Haven or a local nonprofit, gets money in that's restricted in a certain way, okay, it's not programmatic, or I shouldn't say programmatic, it's not sort of general fund money, okay? If I walked into Mike's office tomorrow and said, I'm gonna give you $300,000, but I only want to go to the ball fields over at Max Centaway Field, it's not a general fund item. It's a gift to the town to improve the ball fields.
So is that, in that scenario that you're describing, is it budgeted in our budget? No.
It's
Is-
not, but
You're treating it like a grant,
no, we
and
treated
it's
it the
not a
way we
grant.
thot it was going to be. It's
Right,
not
we
our
didn't have
fault
that information at the
That they
time.
decided to restrict the money.
Have we ever received money from Quinnipiac?
Yes.
And reflected it as 0 in our revenue budget? That is the question.
Well, I can't recall the very first year if we got the money was in the budget. No, they may have surprised us. I remember when the first conversation first occurred, because there was some conversation about them giving it to Hamden. Hamden, by the way, if you remember, had so many, I'm not sure if they're contingencies or restrictions on the money, that they didn't give it to them. They ended up giving it to us. But-
And I don't know if you recall when I was discussing the Quinnipiac money, they did say that this year it was going to be unrestricted.
I
So
guess
this year will go into our budget.
The question is, why don't we record it as revenue? If we're
We have
going
to
to
record
use
as-
it to balance the budget before it goes to the referendum, we are effectively telling the people of North Haven, to the best of our abilities, we're going to collect this source of revenue, all of these sources of revenue, in order to pay for this list of expenditures.
Did you notice that our collections are a little short in the budget?
Yes, and you know why? 2 reasons. One, we
Because we
haven't.
lied to the
requ-
taxpayers?
We've made the choice to not collect money from the general fund, one.
No, I didn't say that. I
Which
said
money
tax
from
collection.
$1.4
fund
million.
balance, it's-
And two, we've decided to not add this additional $300,000 from Quinnipiac.
I said tax collections, that's what I said.
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying revenue shortfall.
I guess I'm missing the point. We put together a budget that, yes, we assumed, because that's what we were understood, and that was our past practice, that they were gonna give us the money unrestricted. Okay, we acted on the best knowledge we had at the time when we put the budget together.
We
Okay,
did
they
not,
decided
yeah.
not to give it to us. Then they turned around and said, we're gonna give it to you, but apparently they restricted it to some particular use. I guess I don't know, besides being more conservative next year, what the point of the conversation is, honestly.
I think that this particular practice that we've never done before, as far as I'm aware, please correct me if I'm wrong, represents two problems. One, it represents a bait and switch, deceiving the people of
By
North
who?
Haven. We are deceiving.
Wait, by who, the board or by Quinnipiac?
I believe we, the board, if we are endorsing this particular accounting practice,
This is not an
Hold on
accounting
a second.
practice.
We're
A bait and
going
switch
This
is when
is
you
not an
knowingly
accounting
put something together in front of someone,
if you
knowing
let
that
me
you're gonna
finish,
move it later
I'll be able to
on.
describe what I mean. May I do that?
Yes, go right
Thank
ahead.
you. So I believe that it represents a bait and switch, deceiving the North Haven community members who approved a budget at the referendum. We're promising to deliver services and purchases represented by the expenditure line items funded by the forecasted revenue sources listed in our budget book. The three numbers that the people vote on are reflective of the budget book. It is not just three numbers. And using budgeted revenue for unbudgeted projects, in my opinion, is wrong.
Well, it's not
Secondly,
wrong, Nancy. You're wrong. You're wrong about your analogy, okay?
it is not
Let
a
me ask you
grant.
something.
We're
Is
treating
it-
it like a grant, but it's not a grant.
Is the ECS money in this budget?
Yes, it is.
It's restricted, you know that, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
knew that when we budgeted it.
And fortunately, we can spend it on education, which is part of our budget, okay?
Yes?
But,
It is part of our budget. That's exactly the point.
and,
It is part of our budget.
but the use apparently here, which is not, okay?
Right.
Exactly.
They gave us the money, they decide
Right.
what we could do with the money. We don't
Exactly.
decide what we could do with the money. They,
So we didn't
Gave us the
deceive the town or the residents, okay?
Because this was the first time it happened. So, as Tim said, when we do the budget, maybe we don't put it in as a revenue item, based on what just happened where they
Right.
restricted it.
Right? And
So we did not know this. We've been doing this all along. Quinnipiac has been giving us the money, and for whatever reason, they said no. Somehow, they gave it to us, but it was restricted.
yes. And
Okay.
so
So
it
we
is the
can't
first
help it.
time. It
Yeah,
is the
but-
first time,
right.
so therefore it is precedent setting.
Right, well.
And I believe that
But
there.
we didn't have any control over
Yeah,
that.
it's not
That
in
was
our
the
control.
university who said that. So let's be grateful that we're getting
getting
that
it.
money
Again,
from the university.
I am not
Because if they're
ungrateful
listening
for
to
the
this
money.
discussion, they're probably gonna say, oh, we're not gonna do it anymore.
right.
So let's be grateful for what we get.
Yeah,
So-
saying it's, we just, we deceived the public, we didn't know.
Now we do.
And if anything, if you
Well, it's
read
after
the
the fact.
newspapers,
So the way that we close out the year is our responsibility. This board's
Would you
responsibility.
like us to give us the money back? I mean,
I think we should, I have a proposal if you'd like to listen to it, but my second problem with this particular practice that we've never done before and is precedent setting, and it doesn't just affect producing the next budget, is it affects 2 years. While there many sources of funding pose risks and are very unpredictable, including this particular source, this practice artificially creates a revenue shortfall.
Which practice, if you don't mind?
The practice of collecting budgeted revenue and not reflecting it as having been received in our revenue budget.
You can't
I don't think you
receive it.
understand accounting, truthfully. Wow. I'm sorry, it's true, okay?
I do understand accounting. Thank you very much, Tim.
Well, then you don't understand grant restrictions.
I do understand grant restrictions. This is not like a steep grant or the grant for the athletic facilities where we applied for a grant, and when we receive it, it goes towards funding a particular project. This is not like that. This is a voluntary payment in lieu of taxes.
No.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's not, it's not, you're wrong.
It is not.
It's a voluntary payment, and that's it.
Because they don't pay taxes. Let's say it that way.
You can say it that way, but that makes a big difference, okay?
They
Look,
don't need
Go in the
to.
back of the CAFR. There's all kinds of funds back there that cover different different items, okay? They're not in the general fund.
When we received the money from FEMA following the tornadoes, that was money that seemed to fall from the sky. Now, I'm sure that there were steps that Ed Swinkowski had to go through to apply for that money, but it was not for a specific project. And when the money came in, it was recorded in our revenue budget. I
Because
view this
FEMA
as
said
exactly
you can
the
pay
same.
for the expenses of the storm, which
The only
showed up
FEMA
as an expense in our budget, or sorry, in the actual numbers.
When grants get expensed in previous years and they do an audit and we receive, let's say, the 10% and it had already been expensed in previous years, then we put it as a miscellaneous revenue in the general fund. Otherwise, it goes to the grant.
So we are calling this a grant, even though it is a
This is not
revenue
a,
line
this
item.
is a volunteer payment
It's a
that they
restricted gift, is the
restricted.
way I would call
And
it.
we cannot receive it in the general fund. It is not a new accounting procedure, it is the right procedure.
And we had no knowledge of that when we approved the budget.
Not one, but two budgets. And it will remains to be seen coming this spring,
I
A, how much
mentioned
money
that-
we'll
that they
receive and whether it will be
not restrict the
restricted.
money this year.
That remains to be seen. So, again,
Admittedly, they could change their mind. They could also stroke us a check for 600.
I don't think that they have, that I have no problem with informing Quinnipiac University how this money should be used, but I don't think that we should allow any outside organization to dictate how this town or this board utilizes our revenue streams. That, I believe, is a very dangerous practice.
So if the library burns down and I come into town and say, Mike, I'm going to give you $20 million to build a new library, we should say no.
If you contacted us in advance and we put it in our budget, then it should be listed in the capital portion of the budget as Tim's project.
So if I then reneged, what happens then?
We would be in exactly the same situation we were in with Quinnipiac 2 months ago, right? Where we weren't going to get the money. We budgeted it, but we weren't going to get it until the fire chief went to speak with the president. So I just think that this is just not an appropriate way to be handling this money. And my suggestion would be to actually record it as revenue, and then the sum total of the surplus should be brought before a town meeting, and the town meeting can decide how that money should be spent.
That's not what the
Quinnipiac
donor would like to do. The
Okay, hold
donor
on.
can dictate it.
Here's what we're going to do,
so.
because
Okay.
we're exhausting. Nancy, if you have a motion, I'd be happy to hear it. We'll be happy to vote on it. Okay, I think we understand your position.
I'd like to make a motion that we change the accounting practice for the way that we reflect a regular revenue line item from Quinnipiac University for the 23-24 year, and we reflect it as revenue to our general fund.
Okay,
Period.
before I ask for a second, I just want to make sure Tammy got that before I ask for a second. Okay, do we have a second for conversation for now? We have a second? I'll second it. We talked a lot about it, but do we have any further comments before we go to vote? I guess my reaction is, I'm comfortable with the accounting. We're going to have accountants come in, by the way, and look at our books for last year and this year, but I'm comfortable with the accounting. I think this is the proper way to handle it. All those in favor, say aye. I'm
Aye.
assuming, Nancy, you're...
Yes, aye?
All those opposed? Nay.
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 Yeah, I oppose it as well. I just want to say that, there is an option here, and I think that you did handle it correctly because it did not go toward any budgeted expense, and that's why in future years, we're probably not going to include it as a revenue item. So I do understand the way it was handled, and I respect that.
Thank you, Mike. All right, we did not get to the Board of Ed reports yet. For June, please. I did want to make one comment, if you don't mind, before we go to questions on the Board of Ed report. Some of you might have caught the second paragraph of Christian's cover letter. I'm just going to read it, actually, if that's okay. It says, with the Board of Education's approval, it's recommended that these surplus funds, and he's talking about $316,629, be deposited into Fund 373, non-lapsing account, Section 7 of Public Act 24-45, authorizes local boards of education to do this as long as the amount does not exceed 2% of the total appropriated budget for the prior fiscal year. Now, I actually just found out about this week. I actually looked up the statute myself and talked to Mr. Monaco about it, and Ingrid may have some further comments, but as best I can tell, the legislator revised the legislation that covered the memorandum of understanding that we have with the Board of Ed, and they stripped out the portion which required the Board of Ed to get either the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen's approval to use, to transfer funds into the non-lapsing account. And that left them with just the ability to transfer up to 2% of their budget for the prior fiscal year. So, Ingrid, I don't know if you have any further comments on that or not.
No, that's what it is. They don't need a
Okay,
Board
so
of Finance.
I guess I just wanted to point that out because it's different, it's unusual. I think the members here recall that we had an arrangement with the Board of Ed where if they had surplus funds, in this case the $316,000, they would come to us, give us a good faith estimate of where they might spend that money. We could either vote that up or down or modify it, but then, as we did last year, we allowed them to move it into this account. And based on what I know sitting here at this very moment, I don't think we have that authority any longer.
And this was based on a change when, Tim?
I don't know the date of it, actually.
It was recently, it's Section 7 of Public Act 2445.
Actually, Nancy, I'll give you what I printed out if you'd like to have it.
Sure, that'd be great. As it relates to that particular issue, the summary sheets that Ingrid has provided us, that the first one that's entitled, thank you very much, Tim, the Town of North Haven Budget and Expenditures Recap. Again, it lists the non-lapsing fund line item, which is technically the BOE under expenditure of $316,629. It's actually considering it to be an expenditure, and it's really not. I think it's just wrong to call that an expense, because it's not money spent or encumbered during that fiscal year. So I think that should be regarded just like the $474,894, which was underexpended on the town side. And so that gives you, a different.
We have to
total.
transfer that expenditure.
I'm
out of the
not
general
disagreeing with
fund.
the
Yes.
transfer,
Okay,
but calling it an expenditure when by definition it is under expended. And if you go to the last page of the BOE closeout budget, it says money available, sort of by definition, that means under expended, and that is the 316,629. And when the Board of Ed has to submit their finances to the state of Connecticut, they will have to back that number out, the 316. So whether you call it surplus for the Board of Ed or you call it under expended, I think that that needs to be carved out and put off to the side, just like the town under expenditure. And then, so then the total expenditures is actually less. It's actually 120, 708, or 709. And then the net under expenditures is really 791 rather than 474.
Well, I think in accounting, you can, I think you can expense one fund into another fund.
Before she started talking, that's what I was going to say. This is part of the general fund. They're going to move that to special funds. We have to,
Yeah.
they will expense it
Yeah,
out
so
of
you
the
expense out of one.
general fund to move it to
Yeah,
the other fund because it cannot be surplus
Yeah.
money.
So we
not
don't have
part
to
of our
get too hung up
surplus.
on
They are expending
the
it
fact
out.
that it's listed here as an expense. It's an expense to us, to another future revenue account or holding account.
To the general fund,
It's an expense to a general fund,
to the
yes.
general fund. But when you say
We are talking about the
net
general
under
fund.
expenditures, that I think is where I'm kind of tripping on this, because you have a net under expenditure on the town side, and you're not listing a net under expenditure for the Board of Ed.
Right, but we are talking about our general fund, and this is a recap of our year end.
Mm-hmm.
And we are expensing it now out of the general fund, meaning our budget. So it's not gonna go into a surplus. It's an
It's
expenditure.
going to go into this special fund, I understand that.
Yes.
But before it goes into the special fund, you designate it as under expended, correct?
No, we expense it out.
No, before you transfer it,
We
you
already
designate it
transfer
as
it.
under expended funds, yes?
I'm giving you a final number.
I might point out that when we just talked about the medical on the town side,
Yes.
we now have a surplus in the account of $107,000, right? So the numbers aren't the same, but we have $107,000 that went into that fund, okay? That was expensed, if you will, but it's sitting there. It wasn't sent out in terms of a check to a third party. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's different, but the same. That 316 is targeted for future expense or future use. And so even though it was not expensed during the fiscal year by the Board of Ed, it is expensed as a part of the year closeout. The net under expenditure line is the amount, both town and Board of Ed, that ends up going into our
Netting out with our revenue
It's
and
what's
going
going to
to
increase the fund
balance.
balance.
our fund
Yeah.
balance.
Right, it's going to
So
increase the fund balance.
that's the number, that is truly the number that's left over. That 316, even though it wasn't spent last year, is going to be utilized by the Board of Ed.
Right, it's just, you have the triple asterisk here, non-lapsing fund pending BOE approval.
Yeah.
It used to be Board of Finance approval too, so that's what I'm just saying. There's the snapshot before their approval, and then there's the snapshot after the approval. And I believe that prior to the approval by the Board of Ed to transfer it, you should show an under expenditure of $791,523, and then, after it's transferred, then show it this way.
I would
because-
say this is not an official document. This is a snapshot, as you will, prepared by the Finance Department to
Right.
essentially tell us where we ended.
Yeah.
As we said, it's not
Yeah.
audited.
No, this is an
right?
internal report.
It's just an internal report. I
Yeah.
think we all know what happened here. How we characterize it in our own minds, I guess, is how we do it, right? I mean, I think we all understand what happened here. They had some excess funds, 316,000, and they moved it over.
I mean, they're calling it a small surplus, it's really unexpended. But yes,
Well,
I
you're right.
agree, I agree with you.
You're
Tim.
right.
I
He
agree.
calls it a surplus. That's what it says in
Yep,
his cover letter.
those are his words.
Right.
I agree.
All right, so I know actually we were still on the Board of Ed report and/or,
Yes.
anything else on that report, please?
I had a question. As we all know, after the referendum was defeated, we came back to the drawing board, and one of the changes that we made was, there was first a proposal to reduce the appropriation to the Board of Ed by 1.2 million, and we were able to shrink that down to $950,000, which really wasn't a cut to their budget, because it was going to come out of their medical insurance reserves. And so I guess I'm wondering where in particular in this report does it show a transfer of $950,000 from their medical reserves, which looks like it has a
Well,
nice.
that would be in the
That
current
would be
fiscal
in the
year. This is the
current
prior
year.
fiscal year.
Right.
Okay, so it wasn't from,
That was in
it
budget
wasn't
session
from
for
June
2025.
to fund,
Right, to fund
July.
this fiscal year.
so
yes.
it would only be
It
from
will
July.
be in this fiscal year that you will see
And we
that.
don't have those reports yet,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't think there's gonna be a transfer, by the way. I could be wrong, because I'm not doing the accounting over there. I'm guessing he's just gonna run down a deficit and reduce it that way, but I may be proved wrong.
Yeah, he
Well-
could do it in
Right.
the end of the year, do
Yeah.
the transfer, right?
Well, I don't think he has to transfer anything. He just runs down the fund balance, right? Not the fund balance,
At
the
the end
medical
of the
reserve.
year, depending on how, if he needs to do that transfer or not, he can do
Right,
it.
okay.
It would be great, Ingrid, if you could find out exactly how they plan to handle that, whether it's at the beginning of the year or we just give
He
them a
gives us
smaller amount.
monthly reports, so I'm sure if he makes a transfer out to the general fund, he will show it in the,
Got it, okay. And I think we can all see the report on their medical reserve account. Looks like they have a balance of $3,194,334, and that is about 17% higher than the maximum amount that is recommended by Brown and Brown, which is 2.7 million. So, again, this is before any transfers, and, but that's a pretty substantial number, and it's nice to have the beginning balances for all of their special accounts, special education, capital reserve, non-lapsing reserve account, and workers' comp.
Any other members have any questions or comments on the Board of Ed reports, please?
I just want to commend the business office of the Board of Ed for a very comprehensive and well-communicated report.
All right, why don't we,
I just had one other comment on the Board of Ed
Go right ahead.
report. Again, I did my sort of back-of-the-envelope calculation at the end of April to try to forecast where things, or see the tracking of where things were going, but we wouldn't have had the monthly reports for May and June. But now we have the end of June, year-to-date actual. And so it seems as though at the end of April, their year-to-date actual was about 45 million with an encumbrance of 3.7 million. And at the end of June, the year-to-date actual was 59, let's call it 60 million, 59,968, with an encumbrance of 1.3 million. So if you look at the difference between those, just the year-to-date actuals, it looks like in a 2-month period, they spent about $15 million. And that does not include the $1.3 million encumbrance. And again, there might be a perfectly reasonable explanation for this, such as they are floating the salaries for the month of July. But we do have the data from the Board of Education, not the special reports, but at least their regular reports for the month of July. And the numbers just don't seem to support that, because I think if you took all of those, first 14 line items, added them up and divided by 12, it's really only about $2.5 million. So, and they run each month typically about a $4 million cost of their budget. So 4 and 4 is 8. I don't know how they quite got up to 15 million in 2 months, but I would love to be able to hear a little bit more from them about exactly how they come up with some of their end-of-year expenditures.
My understanding is that they had a turnover in the AP department. So there was some back billing that they had to process, as well as their salaries at the end of the year. A lot of teachers chooses to do payments at the end of the year opposed to the beginning of the year. So it's the way that they choose to get paid. But I can inquire as
That would be
well.
great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Do we make a motion to accept the reports?
We will. My thought was we would not go into the July reports because it's only a month unless someone has a particularly burning question.
Nope.
Unless the members disagree, I'll take a motion on the reports.
Make a motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, let's talk about the budget transfers for a second. So, give me a second to find my resolutions. So I think most of the members, especially some of us who've been on the board a while, recall that every August we authorize the budget transfers. And I think we probably all recall that traditionally there's been 3 resolutions. And I believe they were the 2 you see here, which is amounts under 20,000 being transferred, amounts over 20,000, which being transferred between departments, and I believe the third one was amounts under 20,000 within the department. So I don't know how, again, how this terminated, but Ingrid could fill in if the members felt the need. But my understanding is that both our current accountants and our future accountants, and I think even Mr. D'Onofrio, have said that the statute doesn't require that we have a resolution on the amounts below 20 within the department. Now, we did get a statement from Ingrid on that for informational purpose, because that's what we've gotten in prior years. That is the larger document you have in front of you. It says transfers in and out within departments. And you'll notice the first one is selectmen, and there's some ins and outs amongst 4 different line items amongst the selectmen, and so on down the page.
I can explain a little further.
Go right ahead.
The 2 resolutions cover the deficits if the department was overspent, under or over. You'll see in the 2-page document, for example, transfers in, second page, that's all the departments that were over. So you'll see at the department level, for example, selectmen was over $608, that's a transfer in. And then you'll see a corresponding could be commingled with other departments, because this is a summary with a transfer out from a different department to cover that deficit. This is only covering departments that were over at the department level. The other spreadsheet where it has transfers within, this is just...
Ingrid, sorry, one more
Sure.
second. So if the members could look at the top of the first page for just a second, you'll notice on the right-hand column where it's shaded, it does delineate between the over 20,000 and the under 20,000.
transfers out. That means that money was transferred out of the department to cover deficits from other departments.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ingrid. Go ahead. You were talking about the other document, I think. Ingrid. Sorry.
Yes. The other document will show what the other resolution would show, and it's just for informational purposes because the board is used to seeing this in how we are transferring within the same department to cover. After we transfer, for example, the 608 from the selectmen, then we have to transfer within their lines to balance the budget.
So I'll tie these into the resolutions if I could for a second. So if you look at the far right-hand column, it says under 20, page 1 and top of page 2 shows the transfers out, they total $50,567.64. And right below that, you see where the money went, starting with with the Selectman's office, and again, you'll see the same total at the bottom there. Likewise, to the left of that, you've got the amounts over 20,000. Page 1 and half of page 2 gives the transfers out totaling $1,523,523.09, and below that, where that money went in the same amount on the bottom of page 2.
Ingrid, I have one quick question. On page 2, if we look at the annual special audit, not the first line for 42,000 or 43,000, but the next 3 lines, those are all sums that are under 20,000, correct? Shouldn't they be in the right column?
Yes, that was probably my error. It's in Department 215. Do you see that they should be all added up to
Yeah,
be in that
right.
one department?
Right.
Well, but they're all, according to account, those are different line items, so that's why they're broken out. So it's line items 02, 33, 34, 35.
Yes, but this is the total amount of the department level.
This is at the department level.
How much the department was over. And it was over 20,000. And then within the department, you'll see those transfers in the other Excel.
So I'm assuming, Ingrid, the process goes something like this to do this,
It's by
right?
the department level.
You start with the under 20 within the department, right? And you move the money around, right?
We start with the departments that are over. We only bring in what it needs to be balanced. So for the selectmen, for example, we only brought in 608 with 58 cents to cover that deficit at the department level.
Okay.
Then we do that with each department. Then in the second Excel, we'll start looking at the lines that were over and transfer that within the department.
Okay,
That way, we're not giving other departments more than what they need.
right.
So it's not by individual account, it's by department.
Is by department. The state law is by department. This is what I'm doing in the other Excel to show you everything is just because that's what your board is used to seeing.
Thank you, Ingrid. Members, anything further for Ingrid on the transfers in or out, I guess?
Yeah, unfortunately, like everyone, I got this Monday night, and since this is a totally different system from the way that we've used it in the past, I'm still kind of struggling to figure out exactly the matching, because as you're saying this, I had to go, in examining this, go to each one of these line items. So it's not just at the department level, but go to the line item and see what is the total amount of the line item that needs to be made up. And then some of that is brought in from within the department, and some of it is brought in from outside the department, correct?
If the department is over, right?
Right.
Let's look at the selectments again, because it's just the first department that we see. Then I bring in, it needs to be brought in from a different department.
Right.
And that is at the department level. If, for example, town clerk, the department was not over, but there were some line items that were, some orgs that were over, that
Exactly.
would be in your other report. Because
Right.
we're only dealing with this on over expenditures on the department level.
Right, like the legal department, for example, for legal fees blight, it's overexpended. That particular line item is overexpended by $22,000.
Can
But
you
you
tell
only
me
have
the-
it listed here.
Page number, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Legal would be page 2. And of this summary, it's also page 2.
Okay.
But in the book, our expenditure booklet is on page 2. So
Okay.
it's overexpended by $22,107.
The department, it's only overspended by $2,000. So that is what we need to vote on.
Right. So, but again, what you're doing there is you're transferring everything that you can from within the department, and then whatever is left over, you have to list as transfers in from other departments.
From other departments,
Right?
correct.
And then it's which category? Is it under or over $20,000?
Right, yes. That is what we did. And then you'll see the balance entry of over and under, because we actually have to input this into Munis.
Oh, ready for the resolution? All right, I'll read the resolution then. Resolved that the Board of Finance approves adjustments in the appropriations of certain line items in the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget, transferring amounts under $20,000 to accounts as follows. Budget transfers, $50,567.64. I'll take a motion, please.
So
Make a
moved.
motion.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. I'll read the second resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends the following adjustments and appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the 2023-2024 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 to accounts as follows. Budget transfers, $1,523,523.09.
Make a motion.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone
I don't oppose, but I would like to abstain on this particular vote because I really haven't had a chance to pour through this.
Thank you. And finally, resolved that the Board of Selectmen shall be requested to call a special town meeting or include same on the agenda of the annual town meeting for appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the 2023-2024 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000.
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, one final piece of business, I think, before we go into any old business or public comment. So I don't think anyone in the town, let alone this room, could have not been aware that the Saca Point Road Bridge has finally been completed. My memory may be fuzzy, but my recollection was that at my first meeting ever on this board, we passed the original bonding resolution for that. That was 14 years ago, according to Mr. Frieda. Over the course of time, the cost of the project has escalated and is more than the original resolution, which I was told was $12 million. So what we have in front of us at this moment is a resolution which would approve an additional $3 million for an aggregate of $15 million to pay for the Sackett Point Road Bridge. Now, Mr. Monaco tells me that we are going to get a 90% reimbursement on this, but the way this works, and I think this is consistent with other projects in town, is that the project has to be complete and the town has to fully fund it, and then we get reimbursed by the state or the federal government. I'm not sure who's giving us our reimbursement here for the funds. So we need to approve an increase in debt of $3 million. It'll be a ban or a GAN, and at some point in the future, we will get roughly $13.5 million of that back, and our share will be something in the range of $1.5 million. So let me just pause there and see if anyone has any questions for either myself or Ingrid before we go into the resolution.
How much have we actually paid towards this particular bond package to date?
I'll have to look into it.
'Cause I'm pretty certain it's more than $15,000 or $13,000. 12.
Wait a minute, it's millions.
I'm sorry, millions. So the original amount was 12?
I was
and
told it was
We're
12.
looking to add an additional 3? Is that
Yes.
my understanding? So on the original $12 million that I assume have been paying off for at least 13 years, how much have we?
No.
The bonds don't get issued until the work is finished.
Exactly, right, yeah, right.
You know, we had approval for that money to go toward this project whenever it is necessary to finance it, and now it's necessary.
It comes under the category of authorized but unissued. So the authorization occurred 14 years ago, again, taking Mr. Frieda's time frame for granted. And I don't know when the first ban was issued, but Mike is correct. The project would start and dollars would go out the door under the ban at some point. That would have probably been no more than 2 to 3 years ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so indirectly, we're paying for temporary funding for what's, for the expenses that have occurred.
Yeah, and who knows, Mike, I don't know that, what happens, but I mean, I'm not sure if part of the interest gets paid via the 90% or not, but it may or may not.
Okay.
All right?
Well, to have this only go over budget by 20% over 12 years, I'm okay with it. This is pretty good, so it'll cost the town an additional $300,000 if we get 90% funding. So I'm certainly all in favor of this, and that area looks great.
Thank you. Any other comments, sorry, by the members before I read the resolution?
Just a quick question, again, since this is adding on to something that's already been approved at a town meeting, we have the authority as the Board of Finance to do this without a town meeting?
This will go to a town meeting
It
after
will
it
go
gets
to,
approved.
that's my
Yes.
question. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I'll read the resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate an additional $3 million for an aggregate of $15 million for costs related to the previously approved Sackett Point Road Bridge Replacement Project, the project, and authorize the issuance or the issue of an additional $3 million for an aggregate of $15 million, bonds or notes and temporary notes to finance the appropriation. The amount of the bonds or notes authorized to be reduced by the amount of grants received for the project and not separately appropriated to pay additional cost of the project. I'll take a motion.
I'll make the motion.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No, but just to clarify, it's a 25% increase from 12 to 15, so I'm sorry. I'm doing math.
Thank you for the correction. I didn't have any old business on the agenda unless there's something that one of the members would like to bring up. Hearing none?
I just want to know why we had the August meeting, because I certainly wanted the summer vacation to continue. But at least someone got the notice, or was in agreement on this.
I didn't forget
'cause we
this.
only have 6 people here.
I didn't forget the suggestion by the second select woman, and so I certainly check with Mr. Monaco
Okay,
as to see what might be on the agenda.
because we did a lot of extra work in June. Okay, thank you very much.
Public comment, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. Nice to see all of you again. I hope you're having a good summer with all the heat and rain. It's nice to see you all. Just very quickly, when Ingrid made her presentation in the beginning on the year-end expenditure report for 23-24, she did make a specific reference of the election department being over $15,000, which is a relatively minor amount of a $121 million budget, but she did emphasize the $15,000 that election was over, and specifically referenced that it was over due to 2 referendums because the first budget was rejected. I want to remind the board that there was also in the 23-24 fiscal year a municipal primary, which is quite unusual. I believe the previous one before 2023 was in 2013, so they're relatively rare. So I think that the primary, and because it was a primary, all 5 polling places had to be open. Whereas referendums, we have just 1 polling place, which makes it a little cheaper. But the 5 polling places were open in the primary. So I think that Overall, the 15,000 is a relatively minor, again, on the $121 million budget, but that it wasn't just due to 2 referendums, that there was a primary. So I don't want folks out there thinking, oh, we better be careful voting against a budget where it's going to cost us $15,000. So I just didn't want your comment to be voter restrictive in any way, and that's why I'm reminding you all of an extra election in 23-24. And I do agree with Saco Point Road. I agree with Mr. Hallahan's comment. It was 12 million 14 years ago, and for it to be only 3 million more, you know, after all those years, it's not that bad, and it was a good project. And it is a combination of federal and state money. I know we're on the hook for 10%. I can't remember the share between state and federal, but it is both. So I'm happy about the 3 million. I was expecting a bit more because I knew about the 12, and because of how long it took and the problems, some of which Mr. Frieda highlighted at various Board of Selectmen meetings, I was braced for it to be a little higher. So, yeah, it's tough to always have to borrow money, but we all know that bridge was crumbling, and now it looks really nice. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Sally.
Nothing from the second select?
Second selectman is deferring.
Oh, and thank you for promoting me to
Yes, I was
second
gonna say.
selectman. I'm third.
Nothing from the third selectman, apparently, then. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.